Hey, what's up everyone? Adam here with Probably Got This, and today I want to throw out the question, why are there so many DPS in ESO or in gaming in general, and a lack of healers and tanks or other roles? This question isn't meant to shame anyone for playing DPS, it isn't trying to tell you how to play the game. I am genuinely wanting to have a discussion about this topic. I have a few theories of why I believe that this is the case in most games, and I'd like to see if you all have the same theory or just open up a discussion again about this topic. Real quick, I do want to give a shout out to all my patrons. Thank you so much for all the support. If you'd like to become a patron, check out the link below in the description. You can get your name up here and many other perks. You can always watch me play on twitch.tv/brahwegotthis live if you'd like to, and you can join our Discord and check out our website at brahwegotthis.com. And before I begin, I do want to say I know not everyone plays DPS. Obviously, there are people probably watching that are like, hey, I play healer all the time, and I get that, but I do think it's safe to say that a lot of the player base in ESO and in a lot of other games play DPS. So the reason I pose this discussion and question is obviously ESO has had a random queuing system for dungeons that will pair you up with fellow tanks and healers and DPS. Well, if you're our DPS, you're usually waiting for a while due to the sheer volume of the role. This then causes people to be impatient and to fake tank, which the ESO community just had a big discussion about recently, which I'm not really going to touch on in this video, but hearing that discussion and thinking a little bit on the topic, I really see that, everyone really does seem to just want to play DPS all the time. Another thing that made me think of this is the fact that I was playing New World and I was healing a dungeon and got absolutely yelled at for doing bad heals, as this guy said, for a guy that was 10 levels under the level requirement and was getting one shot by standing in damage pools. That really irked me, and I wondered, man, this dude must have come from WoW, because I don't usually have that experience in ESO. And I know that some people do have this experience in ESO, but most of my experiences in dungeons are really positive. So these two things really had me in the think tank about why everyone seems to always pick DPS by default in these games. And I want to lay these out to you and kind of talk about if developers can do anything to help with balancing the player base, or if it's just something that will always be the case because of the nature of these types of games and human beings. Some of you may be like, whoa, Adam, are we about to go into philosophy, or what are we about to do? And I would say we're not about to go into philosophy, but I have really thought deep about this topic, and I'm just very intrigued by it. My first theory is I think DPS roles on the surface are inherently easier. And when I go through all these theories, I'm putting these in quotes, okay? So it's inherently easier to pick up than to start out saying I want to be a healer or a tank. When someone logs in or creates a character in an MMO, I don't think the first thought for most people is let's try to do the most complicated thing I can do. I think a lot of people are overwhelmed, and so they stick to a very basic understanding of systems and they try not to deviate from that. The DPS role on the surface is easier to pick up. You attack the boss, you do skills, you do a rotation of those skills, and you repeat. Now, there are things with DPSs that are complicated in some games, and it's not easy to master. I always say the DPS is very hard to master actually, but easy to learn. Tanking and healing, in my opinion, are harder to learn, but easier to master. Now, that's also dependent on the game that you're playing. All in all, DPS is easier to pick up for a beginner player. You don't have to learn about taunting, positioning, when to apply buffs, when to use shields, when to heal. It's a lot more straightforward. My second theory is I think a lot of times playing DPS gets you all the glory. Now, this is definitely a theory that is subjective, because for me, I love healing and tanking, and I think that you feel pretty cool when you are in a long fight and you keep your team alive. I think that's sick. I like to compare it to football though, and the quarterback in football usually gets a lot of the glory on offense, but the offensive line doesn't. It's very similar to ESO or in gaming in general when you have a tank or healer in a DPS role. The DPS is going to get most of the damage, obviously, and they can say that I did all the damage, therefore we beat the boss because of me. Or I did a lot of damage and I feel pretty good about myself. And I've felt this way before as a DPS, I have. It gives you that rush of excitement when you just are melting things. My third theory is playing DPS gives you power. I think once you melt the bosses or you have countlessly cleared dungeons, you get a sense of power that you could defeat anything. I feel like DPS sometimes make you feel like you run the show of the dungeon and everything runs through you, when in reality, dungeons are a team effort if you're playing with other players. So once you have the power, once you get the glory, and you see that it's easy to learn, I think this leads to theory number 4, which is DPS players think that their role is forever simple, but in reality, it isn't. As a DPS role, there is much more to your role than damaging the boss, at least in ESO. Your role is to know mechanics, revive downed allies, stack up for your healer, and not get hit by incoming damage. And these sound simple, but for a lot of DPS, they can't do this. They're in their own world. And I think that if you want to also push your DPS to be the very top percent, you have to practice in ESO. Other games I can't really speak for when it comes to that, but in ESO, you have to continually do your rotation. You have to get better and better at it. It is far from a simple role, but that illusion then makes you think that, oh, this is not my fault if I die, or I don't need to pay attention to this fight. I don't need to move out of this boss mechanic. And I think that really causes a lot of issues when it comes to the DPS role. This then leads to theory number 5 of why so many players are DPS, and I think that's because it's usually a less stressful job and it has less pressure. As a tank and a healer, you are taking on a lot of responsibility, and some of the responsibility is misdirected in my opinion, but there is a big responsibility. You can't, deny that. You have to taunt the boss, you have to put debuffs up and buffs, you need to position enemies. As a healer, you have to do the same except for positioning and taunting, but as a healer, you have to deal with the DPS a lot of time blaming you for something that isn't your fault, which some people are really turned off to. They don't want to be in a position that they will just get yelled at, which is understandable for sure. I mean, who wants to be yelled at on a video game? It's a video game. But as a DPS, your role in some ways is less stressful. The last theory, and this one is a huge one, and that is I think DPS are just generally more fun for the average gamer. I mean, who doesn't want to do damage? Sitting there not seeing the boss's health or enemy's health go down is agonizing and really disheartening. I mean, have you ever, accidentally spec'd a new character and thought, I'm going to be a tank from level 3 and you're at level 10 and the enemies in the overland just aren't dying? At that point, you really want to just pull your hair out and quit. I've been there, okay? And that is why I always suggest putting damage dealing skills on your bar as you level, no matter what role you play. But the bottom line is, in any game that deals with damage, I think that the average person wants to do big damage. I think players are drawn to it because it brings satisfaction and reward and fun. I would say though that tanking and healing has its fun moments too. I think a lot of players just don't give it a chance and they miss out on some truly amazing moments. But this leads me to the end of this video, which is, can devs do anything to really boost some of the other roles and the player counts in these roles? Because it is a massive difference. And that is, I just think it's difficult because there's a part of this that I don't think will ever change. I think you're always going to have that disparity in roles in MMOs, especially because it's been like that for a long time. I think people are just, again, drawn to DPS for the reasons I gave, but I do think that there are some little things that can help. I did notice that my friend was actually tanking in WoW and was actually doing a solid amount of damage a while ago, and that was comparatively to tanks in ESO. Like he played tank in ESO and he played tank in WoW, and he was like, man, dude, I do more damage in WoW, and I noticed that. And I was just like, dude, you're a tank. Like, how are you doing that much damage? And I think in WoW, and I don't know a ton about WoW, but I think in WoW, you just typically do more damage as a tank. It's just the way the game is built, because there's like a threat system and all that stuff, right? That brings me to my point is, I think devs could maybe find ways for tanks and healers to do more damage so they feel like they are adding to the group. Because when you are laying your buffs down, when you're laying your debuffs down, sometimes you don't really feel like you're benefiting the group. But it's kind of like bass guitar, I feel like, for a band, right? Like, bass guitar is so important for a band, but you don't hear it sometimes, and it doesn't feel like it's like important, like if you don't really like hear it, but really it's a massive part of a band. And so it's like, I think it's just that you don't really get that satisfaction because you don't really see sometimes like how you're affecting your group. And so with that, I think they could make skills and buffs and debuffs that healers and tanks utilize maybe feel more satisfying. I know that that's tough because I think that's just a very hard thing to accomplish. I'm not sure how you accomplish that, but I just think that that's a possibility that they could, go into. The last thing I think that we can do is us players can teach people how to play these other roles. I think showing them that these roles can be fun. The reason that all my healer and tank builds aren't meta builds is because I want to make tanking and healing feel fun for players and myself. When I looked at tanking meta and like when I wanted to get into tanking and healing, I was just like, man, this doesn't look fun. And so I was like, how can I make this fun for myself? So then I made some fun tanking builds and made some fun healing builds, and I've had a lot of fun with it. And I think you just need to find a way to make those roles fun for you and give it a shot. So these are my thoughts on this, and I would love to hear kind of what you guys think about this situation. Again, I'm not trying to cause a fight or anything like that down in the comment section or just in general. I just am genuinely curious on what everyone's theories and thoughts are on why this is something that's so big in our game and in other games. I just think that it's crazy like how many players choose to play DPS when it's like there are fun things you can do as healers and tanks. And so I want to get y'all's thoughts on that. Put your comment down below. Let me know. Do you think this is something that just won't ever change? Because I'm on that fence of like, I really think it's something that probably won't ever change. There's things you can do to increase player counts in certain roles, but I'm just interested. I'm interested to see what you guys think about this. And if you like this video and like these kind of discussion videos, make sure to like, subscribe, heavy attack that bell icon to stay up to date on all the content in the channel. It really means a lot. But yeah, I'd like to hear what you guys think about this. But until next time, y'all, have faith, be great, and I'll see you on ESO.